It's Halloween. Hit it!
That's right, if you couldn't tell, it's spooky season in like January. And for this year's Halloween video that's out months after October, I want to take a little drive down the dark road of vampires. So, historically speaking, a vampire in common media is the idea of an undying ghoul that lives in the shadows, drinking the blood of the living to survive their hellish existence, leaving both dead and undead in their path. Throughout almost every culture in history, there is in one way or another a creature that resembles the idea of a vampire, which of course feeds back into the massive mainstream pool of media, twisting what exactly it means to be a vampire over time and location. We've seen interpretations like a typical Count Dracula, both in Bram Stoker's original novel with his classical sensibilities and gothic writing. That character eventually twisted into the generic goofball vampire you think of around Halloween, you know, with the red and black cloak, pale face, ability to morph into bats and fog, over-the-top accents, you know, the usual. We have series like Castlevania, where Dracula himself is the lord of all evil, his castle full of horror movie minions that seem to just exist to serve the vampire king like it's been said before throughout time. Even death itself is Dracula's bitch. Then there's the more modern take on the idea, vampires being more like the edgy punk kids from the Lost Boys or the Ravers and Blade. Sure, they still have those common traits, you know, drinking blood, the teeth, usually a rule or two like no sunlight, no garlic, no crosses. But in general, over the course of time, we've seen vampires shift into beings that aren't outright as horrific as they used to be, choosing to focus more on the human aspects of their undeath. Hell, let's not forget that like less than 15 years ago, America was swept into a vampire craze because of Twilight. I was in high school for that era and vampires with sexy aesthetics were just fucking everywhere. And the Bela Lugosi, Gary Oldman ass vampires were kind of just forgotten about. At least we got Robert Pattinson out of that era. I fucking love that guy. And then, in this ever-growing ocean of vampire media, you have Hellsing, a manga originally released back in 1998 that, in my opinion, was like at the dead center of this exact cultural shift, swaying back and forth from a real human story with drama that you can relate to on a personal level involving these ever-living beings, and the other side being just complete and absolute violence. The evil things that go bump in the night, rising up in the darkness and absolutely destroying anything they want. So, for this Halloween video that's months late, we're gonna take a look at Hellsing, Kota Hirano, and why this sleek vampire action series from the late 90s and early 2000s helped change the landscape for what vampires could be to a lot of people, and is easily a personal 10 out of 10. Oh, and before we get in there, YouTube is not being too friendly with both the anime clips I'll be using and the over-the-top violence that's in this video, so like, comment, and sub to help keep this all going. And of course, a massive shout out to my dude Artartic for being my like one faithful patron. It's forever fucking appreciated, dude. If you want to get a big shout out to in these videos, hit the link below and help your boy out, you know. Anyway, Kota Hirano is an interesting dude. Before doing any research on who he was or his history in the industry, I decided first to just blast through reading Hellsing within like 2 weeks before Halloween. I wanted to try and get a vibe for who he was through his story and his art, and then compare my thoughts based on his post-volume manuscripts, interviews, and info online, just to kind of see how close I was. Well, goddamn if I didn't just hit the nail on the head when about volume 4 I thought to myself, oh, this dude doesn't give a fuck. At its core, Hellsing is about drawing cool art, badass gunplay, and just being a huge nerd referencing all these things that you can tell he himself just thinks is cool. Then I go and read the interviews in his post-volume writings just to see him say, my hobbies are being annoying, beating off, and drawing whatever I think is cool, which are character traits that speak directly to my soul. Now, Hellsing may be his most popular series, followed of course by Drifters, but in his career, he's published well over 20 comics, some having multiple entries and some being just single volume one-shots. And of these 20 to 30 or so series, almost all of them are just straight up hentai doujins. Yeah, so in his own words, The dude is horny, and if you take a little trip online to see some of his earlier works, yeah, you can tell. He was a part of a doujin artist circle called Gaia, which included other big name artists like Yamada Shutaro, who had done the manga adaptation of Read or Die, and also even working with Rei Hiro, the artist of Black Lagoon, under his doujin pen names Red Bear or Tex-Mex, fucking tumbleweed ass dude, creating parodies of things like Cowboy Bebop, Tenchi Muyo, One Piece, the works. But in the middle of all this hentai and dumbass comedy Hirano was creating, he drew a one-shot titled Hellsing, the Legend of Vampire Hunter, that he published in a hentai magazine called Comic Kai Rakuten. This one-shot was, well, about two vampires who are very explicitly sexually assaulting a captured girl, their designs eventually being reused as the Valentine brothers, with a tall, sleek figure making his way into the area, calling them scum and showing them what a real vampire is like, killing them instantly. The girl, having lost too much blood from the earlier events, is given an option by the vampire, calling himself Alucard, to die there or become a vampire and live on, to which he chooses to become a cool vampire. And that's it! Hirano himself said he had no grand plans for this story, he just wanted to draw some cool action for a change since most of his stories were not that. And in the same vein, using some characters he created for a doujin titled Angel Dust, mainly Father Anderson, Maxwell, and Chris, now called Yumi, also using Heinkel from another one-shot he did called Daido Jinjin Monogatari, reworking their stories to make a 3-chapter short series called Crossfire. Apparently, Hirano never received his original copy of the manuscript for Angel Dust back from Pipano, the magazine it ran in, after it was published, so reusing these designs and names for a completely new story was his form of personal revenge, apparently. This Crossfire story was about the Iscariot Section 13, the Vatican's secret problem-solving division, with the two main characters being unstoppable badasses fighting for the glory of God. While they don't deal with any paranormal encounters in these 3 chapters, he would go on to combine the earlier Vampire Hunter one-shot and these 3 chapters with the magazine Young King Hours to begin publication of his first big officially running series, taking the sleek vampire Alucard and making him the main character of the story, the focus being explicitly on extremely cool gunplay, slick art with excessive shading, and over-the-top violence. And, most importantly, whatever cool goddamn shit Hirano wanted to draw. And from chapter 1 to the fucking finish line, Hellsing is an unrelenting thrill ride of bloody fun. So let's get in there first with the man of the hour himself, Alucard, and how everything the series sets out to do is embodied both in its first chapter and its main character. The story opens on a cold night in the English countryside, with rumors and reports of a small town where people have been going missing, soon discovering the new priest of the town as a vampire, his feasting turning the bodies of his victims into mindless ghouls. As local police do the best they can to hold back the growing army of undead led by this evil priest, back at base camp, the motherfucking one and only Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Hellsing arrives on the scene, cigar in hand with a bold declaration. Our Hellsing organization's vampire hunter is here to deal with the issue and should be finished within a few hours. So you lame ass, useless ass police can just, fuck off. And in the moonlit forest, out from the fog, walked a tall man with long black hair tied back under his blood-red hat, a long trench coat of the same color dragging the ground, his yellow-tinted glasses reflecting the moon shining down on them, boldly stepping in front of the vampire priest, the captured girl he has, and his entire army of undead. And then, he gets shot the fuck up, like just filled with bullets collapsing to the ground. But just as soon as his body had crumpled over and blood began running out, it begins to reform from this infinite darkness, Alucard himself reappearing completely unfazed by the barrage of bullets, and from his coat pulls out a long silver pistol, its 454 Kasul round ammunition requirements engraved on the side, letting you know it only holds what's considered to be the most powerful bullets on the market, proudly proclaiming its Hellsing manufacturing with this smooth logo, taking aim and using his own arm as balance, blasting with each shot giving off this extreme recoil, the massive shells spraying out wildly as bullets fly and ghouls just drop. The priest pyre, despite being a vampire himself, knows he stands no chance against this monster in front of him, this absolute darkness that in all essence is a true vampire, and in desperation grabs the police girl he was gonna do the dirty with to use as a human shield, leaving them in a standoff. Well, a standoff where Alucard says, "Hey girl, you a virgin?" To which she can barely say yes before he just blasts her through the chest, shooting Priestula in the heart. As the police girl lays there bleeding out, Alucard gives her the same choice from the earlier one-shot, die here or live in undeath with Hellsing, to which of course she does, becoming Alucard's sidekick and an eventual badass in her own right. Chapter 1 of Hellsing slams its hand down on the table and says right up fucking front what this series is going to be about. Stylish characters, extremely wild art with a huge emphasis on shading and gun combat. And, maybe most importantly, extreme and almost pornographic violence. Despite all the doujin stuff from his earlier career, there's actually barely anything sexual at all in Hellsing unless it's being used for edgy plot reasons. But Hirano did absolutely pull large aspects of his characters and their designs from dozens of his previous series. I've mentioned that Alucard, Anderson, Maxwell, the Valentines, Chris and Heinkel are all from earlier one-shots. But going forward, he would continue to pull in and rework designs from his older series, taking from his own inspiration and turning them all into these clinically insane, bloodthirsty freaks who just exist to kill. Using these characters and following the path laid out by the first chapter, Hellsing begins to unfold what it's truly about. A one-man, three-man, four, war against both God's chosen army and the remnants of a past brutal empire, the last surviving forces of the Nazi war machine. Their leader, a war-hungry megalomaniac whose sole goal is to create an endless and unstoppable conflict around the globe. From this point on, the story would spend a chapter or two setting up both the Hellsing organization and their place in this world, showing Integra gaining control of the family after her father's death from illness, as well as dealing with her traitorous-ass uncle, also awakening Alucard in the Hellsing family's dungeon, with him swearing his eternal loyalty to his new master. After slaying a few lesser vampires for a couple of chapters, we are finally introduced to Alucard's rival properly in the story, the Irish, Scottish, bayonet-wielding warrior of God, the paladin, the bayonet priest, Saint Guillotine, Judas Priest himself, Alexander Anderson, humanity's strongest weapon against the devil. This encounter also establishes the extremely strained relationship between Hellsing and England, both being of Protestant faith and nation, and that of the Vatican, the Pope and his Catholic army, them looking at any other religion as heathens against God. And to top it all off, someone has been making artificial vampires through some kind of science. Yeah, I already spoiled it earlier, but when the revelation that not only was Hellsing being forced to fight against God's army, but also behind the scenes a vampire army was being created in secret over the last 50 years by the surviving Nazi empire, for me personally, that was the moment. I was already sold on the art, the characters, the style itself, but when I realized the plot is just one unstoppable dude fighting against priests, Nazis, vampires, it all just clicked into place. That's when it became so apparent that Hirano was just a fucking otaku who thought, yo, wouldn't it be cool if Alucard fought a badass priest and killed Nazis? To which I said, fuck yes it is, buddy, we have entered peak fucking fiction territory now. The plot's non-stop perfect pacing as Alucard goes from location to location, blowing away both Catholics, Nazis, ghouls, and even cops that one time in Brazil, leading to an eventual all-out war in the streets of London with the Nazis and Catholics wearing really suggestive hoods, raining down and destroying everything in their path, leaving Hellsing and her eternal weapons to save Queen and country. And while I already think this plot is just an instant banger, the thing that really doubled down and hammered it home was just how much I was enjoying the non-stop, violently beautiful manga art it was all being portrayed in. And yeah, I will say, don't worry, we are going to talk about Ultimate and the 2001 anime too. I know that's what most people think of when it comes to Hellsing. But before we break into those, I want to talk about the manga itself, which is by far the thing that's going to keep me coming back to this series over and over. So for research on this video, I ended up reading what I could. A lot of it was untranslated, but most of, if not all of Hirano's early doujins. Mainly, I wanted to find both the original origin for some of his characters' designs, but also to see how far his art had progressed from making those basic sex scenes into what would eventually become Hellsing. And the thing I noticed was, yeah, there's almost no through line in what his art was and what it would become in Hellsing outside of just the characters themselves. Most of these have a very basic 90s art style, the actual H scenes all being pretty there's a lot of force tags in there. Honestly, outside of Hellsing's one-shot, the only real thing with significant distinct style I could think of for him would be Crossfire, and that itself is an action-based 3-shot that ties into Hellsing, with its character designs, intense action, and style being much more apparent. It was when he started drawing for Hellsing that the series' oppressive style and shadow that it's known for would start to become front and center to mix with the action he was creating in Crossfire. And goddamn if it doesn't slap you in the face from the very start and keep laying it down with the rawest and most absolute coolest shots of action, poses, and a general unshakable vibe of a dark oppressiveness. A heavy-ass shadow that hangs over every scene. A shadow that's almost always being cast by Alucard himself. The character designs in Hellsing are, honestly, some of the most memorable and striking from a manga that I've read in a good minute. Alucard's tall and slim stature with his big ass coat and hat, yellow glasses shining are already significant enough. But let's not forget that on his trip to Brazil, he wore this fucking immaculate suit because you know Hirano just wanted to flex that design a bit. Integra is the definition of an anime bad bitch, like goddamn every page with her is so commanding and powerful. You can literally feel the authority she commands in the way Hirano lets the pressure of her presence just fill the room she's in. Alucard, being the only one who can ever really deter that, has the same energy as Balalaika from Black Lagoon, which means you're an instant 10 out of 10 basically. Overall, in general, a lot of Hirano's designs are super androgynous. Integra, Walter's later forms, Cat Twink Schrodinger, Heinkel and Yumi, Rip Van Winkle, like, he obviously loves this aesthetic and honest to God, I think he's a fucking master at it. It really makes so many of the characters memorable and stylish in their own unique ways, like anyone can just be a bad bitch if he decides it, and it rules. Father Anderson and his vicious smile whenever he gets to destroy demons for God, with his priestly collar and cross necklace because, first and foremost, my dude is a devout Catholic. First time he sees Integra, he calls her the whore of Babylon because she's Protestant. Dude does not play about the Lord. Then opening up his coat and launching an endless arsenal of bayonets and Bible pages around the room as he shouts verses. His long grayish white overcoat and white gloves covered in black scrawled writing in the praise of God covering every part of his body that isn't already bathed in darkness. And it's in using that darkness to his advantage that Hirano weaves both Alucard, Anderson, and the monsters of the series in this extreme style that feels like death itself is just leaking out of these dark voids. Anderson's bayonet and glasses reflecting the shine of the moon coming in through the windows while he himself is covered in shadow, and Alucard twisting and morphing into whatever the fuck he wants in the dark. Hirano using this character trait to make the darkness of the world feel like it's Alucard's domain. Like, as long as the moon is out and there's blood to be found, Alucard will never stop coming. The infinite void inside of his undead body just completely paralyzing anyone who sees it in absolute fear. One of my most favorite examples of this shading is the entirety of Rip Van Winkle, whose basic design is already like a 10 out of 10 for me because, oh boy, that's a design. Shout out Hirano because he had the exact same opinion after he made her apparently. But these insane shots of her just existing in pure silhouette, her spiky ass teeth shining in the light, swinging her trusty musket around, and shortly after seeing her amazing design, you're treated to Alucard's assault on the SMS Eagle and Rip Van Winkle, him absorbing an entire fighter jet into the darkness and piloting it directly into the ship's deck. Then, later on using that same darkness to control the ship itself and set sail for London, a dark frigate in the night of absolute death making its way back to the main plot. Side note, but I just fucking love the setup of the chapters directly after this. Nazi and Catholics all battling it out in London while the story itself goes, just wait, he coming, with every character just anticipating Alucard's arrival into the war zone. It really goes to show how truly feared and respected Alucard is, knowing that as soon as his ship arrives, that's it.
We all gonna lay roses on your coffin.
He's gonna start wrapping this shit up, becoming darkness itself as he sweeps the streets, calling back to life the countless souls he's consumed in his thousands of years as he madly laughs and prepares himself for the next war, with war itself being something like a small pastime for him in his unending life. And when characters aren't bathed in these dark and moody shadows, they're instead being lit the fuck up by non-stop gunfire and combat that Hirano is so obviously having a good ass time drawing. In his own words, he just wanted to draw a fucking cool action series that involved gunfighting. At the time, he had decided to use the Alucard character from the Vampire Hunter one-shot, seeing how his design was already really solid and he used guns, making him the main character for Hellsing. Funnily enough, after he used this design in the first volume, he received fan letters saying he was just straight up copying Vash the Stampede's design, as Trigun Maximum was also running at the exact same time in Young King hours. To which he said, yeah, fair, maybe I should have cut the glasses. But to which I say, nah, fuck that circle glasses and red coat aesthetics fucking rule, you nailed it. It's just such a memorable design, flowing red cloak and hair, long detailed silver Casul Magnum, to which he very soon in the story gets a second all black Magnum called the Jackal, a 16-inch, 35-pound handgun that uses 13mm explosive rounds, with the engraving Jesus Christ is in heaven now on the slide, a subtle call of challenge to both Anderson and his army of God, letting him effortlessly dual wield to blow away both anyone in dope-ass combat shots, but also just looking goddamn sick as fuck during scenes like him and Anderson having these hyper-violent gun bayonet battles. And speaking of great design choices, giving Police Girl aka Ceres Victoria the extremely massive rifle to support Alucard from a distance, so massive that Hirano himself apologized and immediately reworked it and made it smaller. But I have to compliment his massive brain, because giving cute vampire girls big ass dope weapons is something he does over and over, and each time I'm like, yes, thank you my man, you did it again, 10 out of 10, keep up the good work. Hirano has said himself that he just designs the guns as he thinks they would be cool, and prefers form over function, so even if they aren't exactly realistic all of the time, they all look and feel so badass that it doesn't fucking matter at all. Also, Alucard has literally infinite bullets per Hirano from an interview in 2012, which to be fair was kind of obvious anyway, but hey, it's canon, dude can just blast forever. I always have a massive appreciation for series that have a major focus on cool gunplay. Like, as much as I love me a good shonen power battle or swordsman dueling it out, series like Trigun, Ajin, and of course Hellsing really just take it home for me. Characters both using weird powers in tandem with raw-ass gunplay, adding a whole level of realism in the fights because they're using weapons that we also use in the real world, weapons that we understand all too well, and it really just adds to the devastation that a bullet can cause in your eyes as the reader, where you feel like your favorite characters might actually be at risk of death sometimes. Well, except Alucard, I guess. A large part of Hellsing is how he's just literally unstoppable and can never be killed, but whatever, it's pretty endearing. And adding into that gunplay, like I've said over and over, the violence and overt brutality in the series is a non-stop thrill ride that feels like both an adrenaline rush of action in some parts, characters slicing, shooting, or whatever else to anyone in front of them. But at the same time, it's like a horrific and almost pure evil slaughter that's just playing out in front of you. The specific chapter I go back to with this is Final Fantasy III, which, yes, there's just an entire set of chapters titled Final Fantasies 1 through 5, with 3 specifically setting the poetic lyrics of Devil's Stockings by Teruyuki Takahashi to the invasion of the Millennium Empire into London. the vampiric Nazi army mowing down any and all citizens in front of them, turning their bodies into an undead ghoul army that begins to bring all of London down in a bloody blaze. It's a perfect mix of the brutal violence that we've been enjoying so far, but it kind of snaps you back in reality with a quick dose of death and realism. The action we've been praising this whole time now being done on innocent citizens while the army marches to their song of war. Hellsing walks this line over and over between just rolling around in its violence like a dog in shit, but while also reminding you how scary and brutal that violence can be. And it just fucking rules. But honestly, going in a layer deeper than the extreme shading, posing, and violence, there's one detail to his art that is the thing I love the most more than any other aspect. And honestly, it's the detail that I think was some of the most detrimental to Hirano himself, seeing as how almost every volume has a page in it somewhere where he is just begging for an assistant, the job requirements getting looser and looser each time he begs harder. That aspect being his intense, unnecessary, and extremely cool small aesthetical details that bleed into all of his designs. From the shadows, the characters, the weapons, it's always there. This meticulous design on both of Alucard's gloves with individual German and English lettering and drawings with this stylish bloody font. Each glove a slightly different design than the other. Zoran Blitz's entire tattoo situation, the words themselves coming off of her body and wrapping around the environment. Hirano himself actually admitting that he had to kill her off ASAP because not only was drawing her just a pain, he fucking hated this character and her personality and wanted her gone as soon as she was made. Her death is actually one of the most intense in the series, so you can kind of tell. Father Anderson's dual white gloves, the right reading Jesus Christ is in heaven and the left saying speak with the dead. The engravings on Alucard's guns, the multiple designs on Ceres's increasingly bigger guns through the series. This Valentine brother with his piercings and shitbag features. The writing on his ghoul army shields reading voodoo people, murder people, which, what the fuck was going on there? Like, it's these little aesthetical choices that really cement just how much I love his entire style. And it's the same reason I've praised Kubo with Bleach, Night Owl with Trigun, and Takei with Shaman King in those previous videos I've made. The art almost always feeling like whatever they're drawing has to be cool before anything else. Because being cool as fuck is what matters most to them, and honestly, to me as well as a reader. Combining all of these aspects together, the amazing character designs, the meticulous details, the over-the-top shading and posing that just elevates the combat. It creates this extremely vivid and just goddamn electric ride that never feels hard to follow or stale in any way. Every fight is fluid and fun, each design is strong and memorable, and there's this sense of ironic levity to it all, comedy being mixed in with the bloodshed. Like, I've already mentioned that Hirano is a goofy guy, drawing these like crude ass doodles at the start and end of each volume that are always dumbass references to other series, but he also works it into the story itself, with Bruce Willis being the soul of Alucard's jet black gun, the Jackal, the name actually being a reference to the 97 Bruce Willis movie The Jackal, a remake of the 1973 film The Day of the Jackal. Ceres's Harkonnen canon is a reference to Baron Harkonnen from the original David Lynch adaptation of Dune. You know, the big ass dude that just floats around. The Major was revealed by Hirano himself to be based off Philip Seymour Hoffman. The constant use of chapter titles being references to all kinds of shit. There's just tons of dumbass gags that always left me giggling because at the end of the day, this is just a series where one dude is having a good time drawing whatever he wants. And it's those little aspects of himself shining through that really made Hellsing something special for me. The manga only lasted 10 volumes, and despite it taking 10 years to release those 10 because Hirano kinda just submitted chapters when he felt like it, it's still a perfectly paced story that gets in, beats your ass, and then wraps the fuck up. With a small prequel manga titled Hellsing the Dawn starting in 2002 on a digital Young King Hours exclusive magazine, and only getting a total of 6 chapters between then and 2006 before the digital service itself just ended. The Dawn was also completely done by Hirano, taking place 55 years before the main story and establishing the history between Alucard, Angel of Death Walter Dornez, the butler for the Hellsing family and extremely badass old man, and the rival SS army. After the first chapter or so, there's a noticeable focus on comedy in the Dawn, especially when Alucard shows up and morphs himself into a small girl literally because why the fuck not, and just starts goofing around the place. According to Hirano, this story was supposed to have up to 80 chapters and was to mostly take place during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, but has stated that both A, he's just too lazy to finish it, and more realistically B, he's been too focused on Drifters, which is his currently going big series. It is a pretty big shame it's unfinished, as it does set up for the major events that happen in these last 2 volumes, that without those missing chapters kind of ends up just thrown into the main story missing a lot of the finer details, but honestly still feels explained and resolved well enough in the main story to not feel so out of place. So if you were ever curious as to why the final 2 volumes of Hellsing start doing things that feel super out of left field involving Walter and Alucard, it all comes back to this. Also, the Dawn was what brought Mina Hawker initially into the story, which is the woman from the original Dracula novel that the Count took for himself and turned into a vampire. Connecting further with that story, Dracula was killed by Van Helsing, reverting Mina back into a normal human who, in the novel, would later give birth to a son named Alucard. But instead, I guess at some point her body was taken by the Nazis to make vampires, since her corpse apparently still held an extremely small essence of Dracula in it. You know, yeah. Alucard himself as a character is not fairly complicated at all. Like, you've seen so far in this video almost all aspects of his personality. He's violent, suave, and straight to the point. Features he's 100% developed from his years of living and killing. A being that exists to do just that and nothing else. He's honest to God just a dude that loves what he does. Except in these last few volumes where his past as Dracula becomes much more apparent. And you can tell that the immortal aspect of his life has kind of started to wear down on him. It really does feel like he wanted to be killed by either Anderson or Walter, like he wanted these years of memories to just finally come to an end at the hands of a human who he actually respected. Unfortunately, it doesn't go that way for him, both of the people he wanted to die by being swept and consumed in their own madness. The death Alucard had wanted still just out of his reach. Alucard doesn't give a fuck to die, he just wants to go out on his own terms in a battle that's worth his time. But these weren't them, so he can't die yet. Plus his master was waiting for him, it's that simple. Also, in a post-series interview, Hirano did mention that in his head, the idea of Walter being unneeded by Integra, her having Alucard and now Ceres to defend her forever as he only grew older, tore at him inside until he decided to become an artificial vampire like the enemies of the series, using the Millennium Empire's technology and becoming their slave in exchange for his youth and power. So it's totally possible that this could have been where the story of the Dawn went, and what he may have wanted to have as its conclusion to lead back into the main story proper. Or hell, maybe he just had this idea itself and thought, not enough time, I'm just gonna bang this shit out to completion. Who knows? Using the original 10 volumes and the prequel Dawn volume, 2 separate anime have been produced for the series. The one most of you probably know about to some extent, if anything, from the Team 4 Stars Abridged series, that being Hellsing Ultimate. Now, before we go into both of these separate anime, I want to preface with I'm not really an animation guy. I'm not someone who can meticulously analyze frames and see the fingerprints of animators' work and growth between their series. I appreciate the fuck out of these things, don't misunderstand me, but I don't want to try and front that I have this deep understanding of anime as a medium and the artists who create it. I'm just a dude who loves manga and also likes anime a whole lot, so all I can really do is give you the info that matters, and more importantly for this video, tell you how I feel about it. And how I feel about Ultimate is goddamn buddy, this is some good shit. Hellsing Ultimate is a 10-part OVA series done by 3 separate studios over the course of 6 years, from 2006 up until December of 2012. So at the start, the original plan was conceived for the OVAs to be done with 2 episodes per volume. So with 10 volumes, that would have been around 20 episodes, about 35 minutes each over the course of 3 years. This, of course, is not what ended up happening, the series changing studio rights over and over, sitting in development hell each time. So the first 4 episodes were made by Studio Satelight, 5 through 7 was done by Madhouse, and the final 3 done by Graphinica, with them also doing like 3 10-ish minute shorts for the Dawn. They were packaged into the limited edition Blu-ray release, and as of right now, for some goofy reason, it isn't available anywhere streaming in high quality and has no actual official English release. They're pretty mid anyway, so it's whatever, I guess. Now, while the series was split between 3 different studios, 3 different directors, multiple different staffs of animators, sound guys, all of that stuff, one thing they did all share was Yosuke Kuroda as the head writer, a dude whose legacy as lead writer on anime is extremely extensive, lasting from as early as 1995 up until as recent as Bastard on Netflix, and he's slated for Mashal in 2023. The reason I feel like Kuroda is specifically worth mentioning is because for as much praise as I'll give the manga and how I do think it's basically perfect, one of the best things Ultimate could do for the series, and absolutely did, was take this world and these characters and give their personal stories a bit more depth and time to sit with you that they really deserved. Hirano himself has said that he regrets past the 8th volume or so, he feels some aspects of the characters and their battles didn't really get enough time to develop, Anderson especially, and I think that's where Ultimate can kind of come in and pick up some of that slack. Now, there's no drastic changes or new info that really isn't at least implied in the manga, but these scenes involving a lot of the smaller interpersonal moments feel much more intimate between characters. Parts where additional dialogue is added to stretch out how insane the Major is about war, or how callously hardcore Alucard can actually really be when he consumes Van Winkle, as well as the larger aspect of Dracula's past feeling like so much more of a significant thing, adding something new and endearing about Hellsing that for sure already existed in the manga, but it brings it more to the forefront in the minute-to-minute moments, and it really elevated these slower parts for me like a lot. Now, to be fair, in the manga, a slower part, quote unquote, lasts basically like a few pages at most before someone is doing some dank ass shit again and the action picks back up. And as a manga fan first and an anime second usually, I can be a little overcritical sometimes about the pacing of downtime versus the main events and how they're handled overall. I know it's an annoying trait, I'm trying to be better about it. But Ultimate absolutely won me over in that downtime. The anime never really feeling like any of its moments were wasted, where even if all that's happening is dialogue, it's written and directed in a way that just absolutely holds my interest. And when Ultimate isn't in these slower downtimes, it's instead on the flip side of goddamn balls to the walls animated action. One of my biggest compliments towards the manga was the absolute violent madness that were its battles, and all 3 studios perfectly carry that same energy into the anime, extending and heightening it in some places due to the sound design and almost perfect one-to-one character models that are all drawn so imposing and outstanding. One thing I thought about over and over for almost every single episode was its honestly really solid use of CGI. Now, in the anime landscape today, CGI has come a really long way and has become an extremely useful and almost necessary tool in some cases for certain series. And while a few for sure still miss the mark, we've hit the point of general quality I feel like where CGI is no longer a big red flag in a series. Well, it's not if you're smart, but anyway. Going back in time though, from around 2006 to 2012 when Ultimate was being produced, CGI was still going through its non-stop growing pains. Tons of shows using it poorly or it just looking a bit stiff and goofy when mixed with the traditional animation. Thankfully, Ultimate was a fucking expert showcase on just how useful of a function CGI could be when done in a really stylish and strong way. Plenty of the series' massive battles being just filled with explosions, bullets, powers, like they have no shame using it proudly and in my opinion, using CGI extremely well between all 3 studios. I talked earlier about how much I like the tonal shift and the dark realism of the Final Fantasy III chapter, and the way Studio Madhouse carried that energy over into episode 5 of the anime, developing their own Devil Stalking song that has this like fast-paced and high-energy swing beat that blasts the lyrics over the insane devastation being caused by the invading empire, fucking floored me and had me grinning ear to ear because they knew. They completely understood how impactful that chapter was, and gave it the exact treatment it deserved, showing off in its 45-minute runtime all the things I've praised so far, from the vivid destruction of London as the Nazis rained death into the world, literally eating a fucking baby on screen at one point. I'm gonna hide this one just in case, but also with the slower moments as well. Pembroke giving his last speeches as he twiddles his fingers and tries to muster the confidence for his troops. The OVA adding these extra shots in the credits to show off both his and Integra's father's Arthur's friendship, that really honestly added a lot for a fairly small side character in a way that I just did not expect. Out of all three of these studios, Madhouse's episodes definitely shine the most in my opinion, from the general animation just being amazing, to the overall sense of Hellsing's aesthetic just being perfectly understood, and episode 5 was the one that really certified that for me. And lastly, one thing I haven't mentioned yet that I really loved from start to finish was the fucking expertly done voice casting in both the original Japanese and dubbed English. Now, I'll be real, the Japanese is totally fine as you would expect, like, duh, it's great. But I gotta give my absolute respect to the Geneon and then Funimation dub, starring Crispin Freeman as Alucard. One of those rare cases when I kind of recommend the dub over the sub, largely because the version of the manga I had read was the Dark Horse Prince. That being the case, they were done with these expert translations that just perfectly help capture the worldwide dialects of the super diverse cast of Hellsing, the Major having his German accent that replaced W's with V's, Bernadette and his non-stop French Monsieur ass, Anderson preaching with his unpenetrable thick Irish or Scottish accent, whatever it is. The Dark Horse manga just fucking nailed it all, and in that same regard, so did the dub, casting either actors with those accents themselves to fill the roles, or picking from a fairly all-star list of known names to phone in a German accent or two. Like, yeah, some people are just American voice actors trying their best. Shout out Yuri Lowenthal doing a French-ass accent, I fucking love it. But it really empowered a lot of moments for me. The Major having a full-ass Joker moment and giving like his 6-minute war speech being one of them. I would defo get bored reading him just go, "fucking war, bro," in subtitles for that long. All my praise for the manga earlier still holding true, I absolutely recommend the shit out of Ultimate. For what Hellsing itself is, I don't really think there could be any more perfect of an adaptation. Oh yeah, they also completely nailed the goofy comedic parts of the series, not being afraid to have the weird long silences backed by the totally loose and silly art shifts that Hirano himself sometimes did in the manga. The Bruce Willis scene was especially nailed too, I was smiling real big during that part, shit's good. Alright, now for as much praise as I've given Ultimate, I have to be honest. Even though it's short, limited in its budget, full of filler with an anime-only ending, I kind of think the 2001 anime done by Studio Gonzo, a studio I always associate in my mind with these super in-your-face and over-the-top series from the early 2000s, things like Gantz, Basilisk, Desert Punk, Afro Samurai, they have their fingers all over the aughts edge. But I think it honestly stands side by side in nailing exactly what Hellsing is, same as Ultimate. The series' chief director was Imanosuke Ida, someone who has a long history in the game of working on things like Lupin III, Cowboy Bebop, The Big O, Gundam 8th MS Team, with the script itself being drafted out by Chiaki Konaka, who's probably best known for writing the scripts for Serial Experiments Lain and, Digimon, surprisingly enough. Originally, a trailer titled Hellsing, Psalm of Darkness was released to tease an upcoming anime. A lot of the actual shots in the trailer being super faithful to the vibe of the manga, with a major focus on Alucard, Saris, and Anderson, even showing off one small scene of the Major and his empire as he collapsed the trailer into a fade-out. But as anyone who's seen the actual anime released after the trailer, you know that didn't exactly end up being the case. This version of the anime is, in my opinion, noticeably much darker in its overall atmosphere. It almost comes off like a pure horror series at times. Sure, Ultimate is dark, duh, but that darkness is treated with so much more of a quiet fear in 2001 that I really think is wholly unique to it. Characters' faces have this bright and vivid inking and specific shading that really brings out the darker scenes to a whole new life. The world this all takes place in being bathed in these stark and contrasting colors, with this blood red sky constantly oppressing down above these goth-ass moments. Alucard always just fades in and out of rooms both in the manga and Ultimate, kind of just implying he's everywhere he needs to be at all times. But something about 2001 really takes those scenes up a level for me. It really captured the aspect that any darkness of the world is Alucard's darkness, like he could be in the shadow of any single room. Now, this is a goofy ass comparison, but I'm gonna make it. In the new Arpat Batman movie, it opens with a bunch of different location shots of Gotham, where the usual criminals of Gotham are doing what they do. Then as the music and the speech goes on, they all start to kind of notice the darkness surrounding them, and slowly start to freak out a bit because they all remember just what's in that darkness. The fear of those unknown shadows and what may come out of them. And they all just take the fuck off scared because what, you gonna stick around and let Batman go Terminator on you? Fuck no. Alucard commands that exact same presence from darkness alone, and 2001 feels that same vibe with unknowing fear throughout its whole run. Along with these extreme colors and menacing designs, the overall soundtrack handled by Yasushi Ishii cements this dark, moody, and evil vibe with a smooth jazz and eclectic rock that just echoes in the background of scenes, giving these violent battles a sense of clean coolness to them. Ishii not being afraid to add vocals to many of the tracks behind the dialogue, which I always fucking love. More anime, please put vocals in your songs. I love it every single time. A lot of the track's riffs themselves are actually sampled from tons of different things, like hell, The World Without Logos, which is the OP for the show, samples fucking Pinocchio. Like, it's so creative and stylish. I'll link a video below that shows off more of those samples. Go check that out, it's really informative and really cool. I feel like people always look at Gregorian chanting-esque music or like Norwegian black metal as the music of the devil, you know, music to kind of give you the feeling of darkness and evil. But man, let's be real, if the devil likes music, he fucking loves the blues and jazzy cool moods. And that's the exact vibe you get from the OST. Like the devil himself is crawling for the darkness and he's about to con you out of your soul. Shout out Me and the Devil Blues by Akira Hiramoto. It absolutely captures that aspect perfectly. Talked about it at length in my prison school video if you're interested. Go peep that, it's raw. But this stylish and moody soundtrack is probably the biggest aspect over the Ultimate's OVAs that I can for sure say 2001 wins 100% in. Oh, also, like I'd already said for Ultimate, great dub. Features mostly the same cast going for mostly the same inflections as Ultimate, so I give it the same thumbs up. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room when it comes to the 2001 series is its 13-episode length, with the majority of it being anime-only filler content. In terms of direct manga comparison, mostly the first 2 episodes, aspects of the third, episodes 4 and 5, and parts of 6 are all that's actually canon, with the Major and his empire never appearing, the roles of the Vatican shifting extremely from their manga counterparts, and all of the events that follow changing into a completely new plot involving a true vampire named Incognito. Was thinking about this while writing the script, but like, does anime really do the whole anime-only ending thing as much anymore? You have classic examples going back forever, Trigun, Full Metal Alchemist 2003, Ouran High School Host Club, Soul Eater, but I feel like as time's passed now, you either just get one season that has cliffhangers that never resolve, or a new season way down the line that just follows the manga plot. The anime-only ending era was a weird time. Not always a bad time, but a weird time. Anyway, now in terms of this actual new plot, both in the minor filler moments and the larger overall changes with Incognito and Helena, I don't really dislike it. Sure, it is much more of a basic generic setup with the usage of the fruit chips to create the artificial vampires. This other true vampire wanting to summon a dark god, which is kind of lacking the same sick ass punch of what if Catholics and Nazis just fucking invaded London? But for the bleaker vibe this anime was setting up, I think it fits pretty well. A pretty good example of that vibe is the Snuff Tape episode where Integra decides that letting a newswoman who got too deep in the shit and had seen too many things for her basic life was probably not a good idea and lets her become a pastime meal for Alucard like that's the best choice to make. Not sure if Manga Integra would make that choice, but hey, girl boss got a girl boss. Incognito himself is for sure like a whatever villain. I did read online that his design was based on Nosferatu, which yeah, that makes sense and that's pretty cool, I'll give him that. There were a few weird things like giving Integra a sister, and even if it was an illusion, the cliffhanger filler ending that's never gonna be touched on again, and the overall animation just being extremely limited in what the studio could do in both budget and time. But all of that aside, there's just such a strong feeling of heart and passion through the entire thing that I just really fucking love so much. And I absolutely recommend this anime even if it is sort of its own experience. Also, there's some clickbait online that says Hirano didn't like Hellsing 2001 and implies that he refused to greenlight any more anime until the series had more material, but there's no source for this anywhere online at all, and the same article goes on to say that Hirano used elements of 2001 in the manga, so he must have liked it a bit, I fucking guess. Like, real shit, Hirano was an otaku-ass nerd, and I'm sure he was just fucking thrilled to have a manga he made get an anime, like, come on. The final thing I'll say about it, and it's slightly different in its comparison, but 2001 really reminds me of the Madhouse Trigun anime that I talked about a few videos back, and how it compares and contrasts to its manga. Both very different in their full executions, but extremely respectful and faithful in their own unique ways. And still listening to both of their soundtracks like daily, goddamn. So before I go, the final questions are both how do I recommend you get into Hellsing and what's Hirano up to these days? Well, on that front, his most recent series I've already mentioned a time or two so far, that being Drifters, and honestly, it fucking rules. The story of a samurai who dies on the battlefield only to be reincarnated in an alternate fantasy world where other historical figures throughout time like Rasputin, Joan of Arc, Hitler are all coming together to compete to fight for control of this new world. I unfortunately haven't read too much of the series myself, since as of its initial release in 2009, only 83 chapters have been published, the series itself on constant long-spanning hiatuses. I've mentioned before that Hirano himself has said he's extremely lazy and incompetent, so that's always a possible factor to the delay between chapters. But honestly man, when you make art like this on a consistent basis for years and years, it takes its toll. Hopefully when he feels both rested and invested, Drifters comes back in a big way. And as for my personal recommendation on Hellsing itself, while both Ultimate and 2001 are great in their own unique ways, for me, nothing beats out Hirano's extremely vivid and violent art. It just hooked me from page to page and leading me on with this dark vibe that I fucking love so much. As for how to read it, there's thankfully the brand new deluxe edition released by Dark Horse that compiles the entire series, Crossfire included, into 3 big-ass blood-red books. The original single volumes themselves are pretty hard to find now and cost a chunk online, but between the size, quality, and price, I honestly have no issue recommending just checking these out. Both of the anime are available streaming online and have accessible DVD and Blu-ray releases thankfully. The 2001 anime DVD I specifically recommend, that one itself being patched up in the release to match the manga sensibilities a bit more while decensoring some of the violence. Probably the best way to experience those 13 episodes. Unfortunately, it never got a Blu-ray release, so like these 480p ass DVDs is the best it's gonna get. Ultimate, you can buy that whole bitch in one big Blu-ray set for like $30 on Amazon. Go check that out, it's fucking worth it. All said and done, deciding to sit down and both read and watch Hellsing for Halloween this year was one of the best choices I could have made. Obviously so, because as soon as I finished it, I got to work on this video and move my next ones down the pipeline. Stay tuned for those coming soon. To tie it off, I want to bring up a quote from Hirano himself from an interview in 2012. In the conventions overseas, the fans go crazy no matter what. I've heard things like, "You rock" or "Hell yeah," they're always so hyped. It makes one think, wow, I'm really famous. But for the most part, it's just a wow or holy cow. It's kind of similar to the reaction one gets when being introduced on a guest on Telephone Shocking. That's why I'm not sure if there's really a difference. I'm just a Japanese mangaka drawing stuff for Japanese readers, and only for a small amount of them. Rather, it'd be more fitting to say that I draw for people like me. So I'll be happy as long as there's middle schoolers out there smirking while reading the stuff I draw. This is a Chunibyo manga in which a Chunibyo author poured all of his time and effort to draw for all the Chunibyo people out there. So if you are one, please give it a try. And that in itself is why Hellsing works both for me and for his fans all over the world. For all the shit I've talked about him that he himself has written, I'm just like Hirano, a dipshit edgy degenerate who obsessively loves whatever I think is cool. From violently fun to dark and oppressive, Hellsing is one of the rawest things I've ever got to experience, and will absolutely be something I revisit over and over through the years. Hope you all had a good Halloween and a good following all the holidays after, because whoops. Hit the Patreon below to help me make these dope ass videos faster. It's forever appreciated. Really sorry this video took some extra time. It's been real rough out here. See you next time with some more stuff. Thanks for watching.